Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us in this edition of SRE Practitioner Series. I'm your host, Suresh GP, and today we are in episode number 6. So, today I'm very honored to have Mike Marchese as a SRE practitioner and author joining us today from Washington to share his insight on his journey on site reliability engineering. He currently leads a team of rockstar site reliability engineers at Blockstream. So let's welcome Mike to this episode of SRE Practice Series. Thanks so much, Mike, for taking time and joining us today to share your insights.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Excellent. So we wanted to kind of get you started. So why don't you give us a bird's eye view of your SRE journey and what has been something that has really worked for you as a SRE practitioner, what has not worked, so we can kind of dwell deep into some of those aspects.
Yeah, sure. So I've been working as in systems administration and the various iterations of that for since about 2001. So transitioned a lot from basic hardware and Windows support through the years. Moved into supporting Linux machines, and then learned scripting and languages, and got involved with Chef. So I learned Ruby, and then that's when it's really started to kick off into DevOps, the DevOps realm, I would say. Um, and then the last few years, I've moved into SRE management, and I've had the privilege of working with some really talented individuals. Um, now at this point, I'm over at Blockstream, and we're a cryptocurrency company, and definitely a new space for me. And that's kind of where I'm at now. Um, as far as what's worked and what hasn't, that's definitely a loaded question because um, so most of the time it's been focusing on tools and focusing on tech, right? That's really what we do, especially the DevOps world. As I mentioned, with Chef and Ruby, that really changed things. That really got me involved and really got me excited about uh, the the tech that's involved with that. And I know for a lot of people, that's really what gets them up in the morning. But I think that what's really worked, especially when being involved with management, is getting back to what the real value is for SREs. We need to bring value to the customers, and so focusing on that on occasion and finding ways of engaging customer support teams and people interact directly with them really gives you an idea. It helps you get a direction for your team and where to focus your efforts. And so, yeah, I'd say that looking at things from that lens has worked for me more increasingly lately.
So, in fact, most of the companies do not have different departments. So, the way you do SRE in a small mid-sized segment towards large enterprises, there are strikingly different in terms of people understanding the end-to-end value chain. Sometimes I think we get lost in our own world of doing some of those block work, but not
Hmm.
having visibility around that. So, have you seen that being a common phenomenon in many of the organization of different sizes?
Yeah, absolutely. I've worked at large Fortune 100 companies before, and they definitely I don't want to say you get pigeonholed. It's never, especially with SRE, it's always kind of you're working on something different every day. But that being said, a lot of times at big companies, you don't. There's many layers of management and project management and different people that are between you and the customer, basically. And you might not ever get that kind of direct feedback. But with smaller companies, yeah, you might end up having to be maybe between you and the customer, especially during an incident. There might be one person that's your customer's, sales, maybe even a sales rep, maybe a customer success person. um so Yeah, that's what's really important. I would say even especially during incidents, that it's always good to be able to get direct feedback from the customer. You know, if you get an opportunity during an incident that you could keep someone on the phone, someone that's out there in the wild, that you could say, okay, I think we fixed this. Can you verify that? If you get that from the customer, that's like almost, I don't say 100%, but that's a very good indication that things are looking good. And so that's huge. And it's hard to get that when you're working in a really big company. That's just an example.
Right. And that brings a very interesting point here that many of the times the incident management team thinks like, oh, the SRE is coming, probably we are going to be out of jobs. So is that SRE posing a threat to the support teams of L1, L2, L3, or do you think how they complement for a major incident, and particularly for a bridge where you have 100, 200 people clogging to identify what's happening around? So what do you think the kind of the conversation between the support teams and SRE? How are they kind of playing that complementary role rather than just doing the same firefighting?
Yeah, I think, well, that's, I think, a common misconception, I guess, of what SRE brings into an organization. And I think that's just historically, it's built from this attitude that SRE is DevOps. We're going to build tools to automate, automate people out of a job. Now, I'm all for automation and automating things that you could do twice, but bottom line is that you need those customer support people. They're really important, and it's best if you embrace them rather than make them concerned. I think the big part of that is education and helping the customer success team or customer facing teams really understand what it is you do. And sometimes they'll come up with ideas that you might not have thought of on ways that you can bring more value to the customer experience. And that's what I found is that just if you can, for instance, even in sometimes in your sprint planning or whatever organizational meeting you have with your team, maybe not sprints, but if you could involve those people and also maybe even embed your team with the customer success team, um, you're going to get some really good feedback and really good ideas, and it's going to really help you drive the direction of where you should go. And as to my point is that it shouldn't always be focused on tools and tech. It needs to involve people, and we're serving people at the end of the day. In fact, I think that if you really consider that SRE is it should be a customer service org, really. I mean, yeah, we're tech, but at the end of the day, we want to make the customer experience as good as it can by reducing downtime, increasing reliability. It's in the title. That's the whole point of that, is so that customers can consistently use your products and without any issues. We need to remember that, I
Yeah.
think.
Well, that's a very fair point that people just get so much inundated with the tool chain and looking at what else can we do as part of pipelines. But going back to the education part a little bit, Mike,
Hmm.
many of the times I see from the leadership team, there's not a lot of awareness about site reliability engineering because at the end of the day, they don't care whether you call it as DevOps or Lean or SRE. All they care about is profitable growth, improved customer experience, and retention. So, how much of a difficulty have you seen that from a leadership enablement perspective that site reliability engineering is being faced? Is it that the leaders do acknowledge the value of SRE, or is it kind of an uphill battle to make them understand what's the value that they're going to get by implementing site reliability engineering? Because I have struggled many times to get an FTE approved for site reliability engineers, right? So it's a
Hmm.
strong business case. So what has been your experience, particularly in getting the acknowledgement and support from the top leadership team to build SRE as a capability?
Yeah. In smaller companies, I think that the leadership is focused a lot on growth and profitability, and bringing SRE in is there's two things, right? It's an investment and it's a changing culture sometimes. I found with the small teams that were, let's say in Series A funding rounds, tend to want to move fast. They hire a lot of developers, and there's tends to sometimes not be a lot of gates. And so SRE, we come in sometimes and people are like, oh great, now we have to, be careful about how we're deploying things. We have to start writing tests, and we can't move as quickly as as we used to. And I think that's a big challenge that I've faced in working with some smaller teams, is showing them like, no, we're not the release police. We're here to make your experience a little bit better, but we're here to make it safer. We want to move fast, but we want to move safe. And so yes, I have found that there can be challenges, and we have to show where our worth is. And kind of going back to the customer service aspect of that, as far as proving how we could drive revenue and growth, is I feel that the way to do that is to kind of democratize the data that you have. If you get SRE speaks in terms of metrics and terms that are not always easy to consume. I think that we build dashboards and graphs and monitors and alerts on things that might be very only particular to one development team, or in very technical terms. And we need to remember, like, no, we need to take a step back and say, how are we going to show this to leadership and show this to customers in a way that they can consume this data? How are customers going to be able to look at the information that we're gathering and say, okay, you know what, this is good. I trust these guys because this is something that I understand, and they seem like they're really on top of it. And hopefully they think, oh, their SRE team is really great. They're taking care of things. So that's what we got to focus on. We need to be able to make the information consumable by people who might not be super technical.
That is a great point. I'm just trying to relate with my experience when you said about democratizing the data. I had one of the CIO that I was working, and I asked him, how many reports do you get every week? And he said, Suresh, I get 42 reports every week. And I said, out of the 42 reports, how much of them are you really reading? And he said, 2 reports. And I said, what about the other reports? He said, no, they've been sending these reports since time immemorial, and they continue to do them. So, and then we did this exercise where we said, okay, now we know something. I said, can I do some experimentation? He said, what are you going to do? I just want to play on the remaining reports to see if someone reads this report. So I made some changes in the next week and I released it. Guess what? How many people actually looked at the reports? Almost zero. So we killed 40 reports. And the CEO said, this is great because we have a lot of toil here because they are just producing reports which nobody reads. So that's because it's not in a consumable format and it's not really presenting the right ideas. So people think that one size fits all, and then they just send reports after reports, but it really doesn't make an actionable insights of having to do that. So I completely think that the democratizing the data and talking the language of the business will make a lot more changes in how we apply. Now, in terms of hiring skills for SRE, have you seen that it's better to be homegrown, or do you think someone from outside would do a great job of SRE? It's always a kind of buy or grow within in terms of capability. And sometimes it's very demanding to get people or resources from outside. So have you had these challenges in terms of hiring the right level of skill set for SRE? What would you look at if someone would fit the bill for being a site reliability engineer?
Yeah, I think it's changed specifically with COVID, right? We've moved more towards a remote first culture, more so than when we were before. And it's kind of given a lot of organizations the opportunity to hire from places that they normally wouldn't have. I've worked more recently with very, very globally distributed teams, and I'm finding that the skill sets in when you're hiring from people in Europe or Asia, and their experience is just kind of a lot different, and it's something that you got to get used to and you got to integrate into your team. But I think as a result, it's it's good. It's a very good thing to introduce that kind of diversity, but you're not always going to get the Stanford graduates always. You might get someone who's just spent their time in the last 20 years hacking the kernel, things like that. So what I think the key is that regardless of whether you source them from the outside or within the organization, you need to build the excitement. You need to have a good program and a good I guess roadmap in order to get people engaged, and that's when you get the most benefit. So I don't know if it's really hard thing to say. I do think that bringing people in from the inside that want to do it, and especially if your SRE org is a little bit more mature and people know who you are, and people outside your organization are excited, hell, bring them in. Like, let them do the work. If they want to do it, I'm all for it. Yeah, that being said, I think I've hired some of my best engineers from outside of our organization, but it was really on me as a manager to get them to actually be engaged. I mean, if you don't do that, they could be the best. You might be losing out on potential, I think.
And in terms of one of the things when we talk about site reliability engineering, when they apply these principles, what has been your experience in driving those commercial off-the-shelf products? Because you don't have a lot of visibility on the code changes, and it's kind of still monolithic in nature.
Mm-hmm.
So do you think that still there is a scope of an SRE to be excited when they work with large-scale monolithic systems and how they work, or do you think they're more tuned towards cloud natives? Because I think there is a concept of my model IT that exists. So what would you say for some of these apps which is typically vendor driven and they take a whole lot of time to make changes?
Mm-hmm.
How do you see the SRE experience?
I've found that sometimes it depends on the type of well, I mean, really what it is sometimes you get these engineers that are younger. I'd say that definitely tends to play a role in it, that they do not have a lot of experience with these monolithic applications. And initially when that happened, when I started first getting management, I thought there's no way that these young kids are going to want to work on this really
Right.
old stuff. But I was absolutely wrong. And the other way around, I've hired people that were, definitely in the, I would say, older category as far as of DevOps and SRE. And they are the first ones to want to jump into these cloud native projects. So you definitely can't go in with any preconceptions. You have to really just get to know the people and talk with them and say, what projects do you really want to work on? What's going to help me get you out of your comfort zone and help you grow? And a lot of times that's usually how it is. Like you find out what they've worked on and give them something they haven't necessarily worked on, something that makes them feel a little bit uncomfortable. Because at the end of the day, that's what I think engineers love to do, is learn. And if you're working on the same projects all the time, you're gonna kind of hit a wall. You're like, okay, I've done this 50 times. I've created Helm charts. I've done Terraform, and that's boring now. I went something else. I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to send you to the data center and you're going to go pick up a server and rack it and hook it up and see what goes on behind the scenes. And they love it. And some of these younger people have never been in a data center. So you give them that opportunity, it's like magic, kind of.
Right. And that's a great revelation in terms of telling not to have preconceived notion. You have both sides of spectrum already available. So in terms of their, one of the things you generally talk about is building the tech talent. So
Mhm.
how do you build, and what is your how do you make this tech talent a reality? Because you have a lot of different communities and practices and other stuff. So what's been your experience around that? Building the tech tunnel, because it becomes an integral part of the site reliability engineering lifestyle. So, and not many of them are getting exposed to some of those tech trends. So, what
Mhm.
do you do as a manager or managing a team to have that common understanding around different communities or some kind of refugee communities.
Yeah,
In the work.
yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think that we have, as I mentioned before, with COVID and working from home a lot, we have a lot of unique opportunities to draw talent from places we didn't have the opportunity before. And one thing I'm kind of passionate about is trying to source from places and groups of people that might not that are in situations that are not ideal. What comes to mind, obviously, I think for a lot of people is the situation in Ukraine, where a lot of people are being displaced from their homes. I personally have worked with a lot of people from in Ukraine, and I have to, and you see them all the time on LinkedIn, and they're now working from bomb shelters, and they're working from somebody's home in Poland that they don't even know, that they just met, and let's face it, like there's been war going on constantly, and there's lots of groups of these people that might have been, not just in tech, but in medicine or in other highly skilled um, categories, that they go to another country because of war where they are, and war where they're from. And your first concern is not I'm going to start working and once again building these helm charts, and no, you're trying to figure out how you're going to feed yourself and how you're going to clothe yourself, and get mental help sometimes. And so the tech skills are lost. Sometimes those people have a hard time even finding a way to get into to work, first of all, legally, and then work in tech again. And when you spend 1 year, 2 years out of it, it's hard to get back in. And we can't leave those people out. We have to, find ways to continue to engage and educate and keep them in the loop so we don't lose that talent. And so that's why I really like to find ways to possibly hire from groups of people like that. And so yeah, so to my point, sorry.
It also creates a kind of a diversity in terms of how you bring fresh new perspectives that you've never thought about, because you've been doing certain activities in certain manner throughout, you tend to think alike. But if you have someone from a different background and perspective to look at it, they might look at it from a completely different pair of lens, and that could give us a lot more, far more enriching insights that we kind of might miss it in the long run, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, my, 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 my last question would be in terms of SRE and their value to the organization, and I know there's a lot of demand coming around it. So, what is your recommendation on the future of SRE? Where do you think SREs are going to make a difference? Where do you think uh, what do you think an SRE should keep in mind if they want to become a full-blown, well-deserved site reliability engineer? What would be your thoughts on?
Yeah, obviously you need to keep your skill set relevant, but once again, remember how you can bring value to the business. Remember how you can bring value to your customers, and think outside the box. Innovation is key. I think that and I've recently been discussing this with colleagues, is that it's getting kind of stale. And we go to sometimes these conferences and talks, and it's starting to become a lot of the same stuff. And I think that what we really need in the future is new ways to do our job. We need to start thinking outside of the box, and keep the discipline, DevOps, SRE fresh and new. We can't just keep building Terraform home charts again. We need to find better ways to enrich the customer experience, and that's what's gonna keep this going. I mean, I love the community, definitely. I'm trying to be way more involved, and I've met some amazing people through it, and so that's how we're gonna keep this amazing. I think we need to keep everything fresh.
Awesome. That is really good because I love what you do for the site reliability engineers and also to the community. So we will publish your tech blog, which is Marchese.se, and people can have a look at it and get inspired. So thank you so much, Mike, for spending some time today to share your perspectives and journey around site reliability engineers. And I love the word that you finally closed with, that saying SRE should be fresh. So fresh, relevant, and make sure they make customers and business look good. So awesome to
Great.
see you there.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. And I hope the viewers enjoyed as we speak, and stay in touch for our next episode on the SRE Practitioner series. Thank you so much.
Thank you.